Hello YouTube and welcome to another episode from Eagles of Empire Miniatures. In today's video we are going to do a unit analysis of probably the most quintessential Franco-Prussian unit of them all, the French Line Infantry of 1870, with their blue greatcoats and the red kepi and white gaiters and the pointy tent poles on the backpack. They are probably the core unit and what I think symbolizes the Franco-Prussian War in terms of uniform. So let's dive into this episode and have a look at the French Line Infantry. So in this episode we're going to cover a little bit of history and background on the French Line Infantry. Then we're going to jump over and have a look at the unit stats and how this unit plays in the Eagles of Empire skirmish rules. And finally we're going to have a look at which hero you potentially could attach to the unit and what kind of doctrines you could play to boost the French Line Infantry performance. But let's start out by looking at the history and background of the French Line Infantry. So having a look at the uniform itself, you have the blue greatcoat, which is really I think one of the key ingredients in the uniform, very different from what you saw on the Prussian side. And the blue color, well, it's a heritage from the Great Revolution and the First Republic, where you have the tricolore, the bleu, blanc, rouge. So the blue color would be a lineage from the uniform of the 1790s and later from the First Napoleonic Wars. The pantalon rouge, the red pants and the red kepi, well, that actually is something that was developed due to a special dye that was extracted in the North African colonies of the French Empire. So it was a very special and very signal red color that they got from that part of the world. And it actually survived all the way up to 1914, where they would change during 1914-15 over to the horizon blue uniform. But the red kepi and the pantalon rouge would survive all the way out to 1914. So these elements are some of the key elements that really help the French uniform stand out. The uniform as you see it in the Franco-Prussian War, well, it was very similar to the uniform that was also adopted during the late Crimean War and also in the war in Italy, the War of Unification, the war against Austria. So it is a uniform that is very closely connected also to the French Empire and Napoleon III, as all of these wars were wars he fought during his imperial reign. What is really unique also, I think, about the French, when you look at their equipment, is the chassepot rifle. We've got to talk a little bit about the chassepot rifle because that was a Class A breech-loading rifle system developed in 1866, so about 5 years before the war. It saw immediate adoption and production. It was a breech-loading system that was a little bit different than the Dreise needle gun, which the Prussians used, because this one had a rubber seal, so it would have a higher muzzle velocity because less gas, less fume would evaporate out of the chamber, and the rubber seal would help to increase the muzzle velocity of the bullets. Also, the firing system was easy to handle, and the rate of fire was somewhat improved when you compare to the Dreise, which had a rate of fire of about 6 to 12 rounds per minute. Well, the chassepot would reach 8 to 15 rounds per minute, so superior weapon in many ways. Also, when you look at firing range, they are more than double the effective fire range compared to the Dreise needle gun, which had a range of about 570 yards or 527 meters compared to the chassepot rifle, which had a range of about 1,300 yards compared to 1,200 meters. So 1,200 meters compared to 527 meters on the Dreise, it means almost closer to almost 3 times, but more than double the range. So that is something the French really could exploit during shootouts with the advancing Germans, and they did so. They adopted a strategy. I mean, they came into the war knowing that they would have a superior weapon system in the Chassepot compared to the Dreise. So they adopted a very static strategy. They would find great defensive positions in the terrain, and they would just bunker down and receive the Prussians, believing that they would be able to fire, have effective enough fire rate to simply shoot away the Prussians. The Prussians, as I talk a little bit about in my unit analysis about Prussian Line Infantry, well, the Prussians would just counter that strategy by using the sheer volume of the numbers to simply dig in at the front, and then they would just flank the French position because they would have a numerical superiority in almost all the initial battles. So the French reliance on the Chassepot, even though it was a superior weapon, the French reliance on the Chassepot as their tactical superiority kind of backfired on them because they became very static strategically during the battles, believing that they would simply be able to fire away the Prussians. But that didn't really happen. There was hordes and hordes of Prussians, and they were able to simply outflank the French positions time after time. So that is what I have to say on the French uniform and the French weapon. We can talk a little bit about the French officer corps also, interestingly enough. Compared to the Prussian officers, where many of them were educated and highly literate, well, the French army system was built up in a different way, and many of the officers were actually illiterate. There was a high degree of illiteracy during also among the private soldiers, and the French recruiting system also allowed for higher members of society to simply buy their way out of army service, which again kept away a lot of potential quality officers, literate officers. So there was perhaps let's say a theoretical difference there also between the Prussian and the French side, and you could also say that the French army of 1870, well, they fought in Italy, they fought in the Crimea, but Germany had just executed two very swift and effective wars in 1864 against Denmark and 1866 against the Austrians, and they came into the war of 1870 sharp and fresh, whereas the French, well, they probably had a tendency to rely a little bit on past laurels, believing that they were in many ways superior to the German army, but that would be disproven during the coming battles of 1870. So let's jump over and have a look at the French Line Infantry unit stats. A squad of French Line Infantry will cost 3 command points to recruit. For more information on command points and how the game works, we have some YouTube videos on this as well. But looking at the unit card here, well, we can see in the top right corner on in the little circle on the eagle that it costs 3 command points to recruit, which is a standard cost for line infantry of all factions. If you look at the movement rate of 6 inches, well, it's also standard compared to Bavarian and Prussian line infantry. What really stands out here, I think, is the weapon range, 27 inches. The Chassepot has 33% higher weapon range compared to the Dreise, which has a 18-inch weapon range, so 2/3 of the Chassepot. And that, of course, is going to be something that you would want to exploit as a French player in the game. I'm not saying you should do as the French did in 1870 and just bunker down and expect to shoot away your enemy, but you will have a tactical superiority in the game due to a higher reach of your fire. You'll be able to inflict casualty before the enemy will be able to retaliate. And that is something you need to keep in mind as a French player, that you have the chassepot. The Prussians will have things to counter, they will have a more effective artillery amongst other things, but you will always be able to integrate the extra 9 inches of weapon range into your strategy, and you should as a French player, I think. When you look at the firepower of 3d6, it is similar to what you would find on the enemy side, but again with the added advantage of the chassepot range here for the French. Close combat charge value 3d6, also average for infantry of the line, and you have a 2d6 defense value, which is also a standard. Unit strength of 3, of course, which reflects the morale of the unit. When it starts out as a fresh unit, it will decrease to 2 and 1, and then 0 will be it'll be removed. So that is how the unit strength reflects the morale. You would have a unit strength of 3, then you hit and save on 4+. Unit strength 2, after taking casualty, you'll hit and save on 5+. Unit strength 1, after taking additional casualties, you will hit and save on 6+ on your different die rolls above. So looking at special abilities for the French Line Infantry, well, as all infantry, they are able to cross woods, which is not something artillery and cavalry can do, so that is an added bonus, of course. Tactically, you'd have some more options in terms of movement, and the icon to the right, the house, means that this unit can occupy buildings, which is also an advantage in terms of getting cover and maybe defending tactical objectives and so on. So this is a core unit for the French army, and a unit that definitely has an upper hand on the German counterpart if you look at it in face value. But as I said earlier, the Germans will have things, the Prussians will have things to counter with in terms of artillery, but also in terms of mobility. They will have some different doctrines than the French, which reflects the German tactics of 1870, where they were flanking the French army a lot and using the terrain and using numerical superiority, and also using concentrated artillery fire in a different way than the French were doing. So those things are reflected in the German doctrine card. So be aware of that as a French player, that the Germans might look a little at a disadvantage, but they will have some tools in the toolbox which can really hurt. So let's look a little bit at the French doctrine card, which is the standard doctrine card that comes with the starter set for the rule books. It is called en avant, which means forward in French, and here you have some interesting options which you can add to boost your French Line Infantry effectiveness. You have something called hold the line, where you are at 1 command point cost. You get to choose a unit in command, which means it has to have a officer attached, and this unit will roll an extra defense die per squad this entire round, costing 1 command point per squad. So if you would have a section consisting of 2 squads, you would pay 2 command points. If you only had 1 squad, you only pay 1 command point, and so on. And this will give you I think a somewhat upside when you combine it to the commander, the hero you can attach to the French Line Infantry called Commandant Berbéguier. So I'm going to talk a little more about Berbéguier later, and how hold the line will be at even more effective when you combine him as a hero for the French Line Infantry. But as a unit, as a doctrine card on itself, I think hold the line is an interesting option for the French infantry to get in there and to stabilize some of the tactical objectives. Even if they're taking a lot of damage, they have some staying power on the table for a low cost. Then for 2 command points, you have French Elan, which says all units in your line that just repel a charge may now counter charge with 1 extra attack die per squad. So if you are hit by the Prussians and you have repelled them, you can now make a free counter charge, which is really effective. The Prussians might have lost 1 or 2 unit strength as they have been repelled. They lost their hand-to-hand. So this is a really effective doctrine to finish off Prussian units on the table that have been involved in hand-to-hand and now have been softened up. So interesting doctrine activation there for the French also. The last one at 2 command points and 1 ammo. Now remember, one of the tactical objectives on the table is going to generate ammo as well. So this last doctrine activation costs 2 command point and 1 ammo. It's called Dernière Cartouche, which is actually inspired by a painting from the Battle of Sedan. It means the last cartridge. It goes like this. Choose a unit in command. This unit may perform an additional fire action this round with +1 d6 per squad. So you can now look at a unit in command. It could be, I mean, it could also be, in reality, it could be a mitrailleuse. I had a follower on the YouTube channel talk about this, and I think it's an interesting option to use this activation. But you choose a unit which is in command and is now means it has to have an attached officer, and you can actually use this for a battery of mitrailleuses. Also very interesting. You could get a really strong effect here because this unit may now perform an additional fire action this round with +1 d6 per squad. So infantry will get another fire dice, also artillery will get another fire dice. Really effective if you gotta finish off some advancing Prussians. Right, so let's jump over and have a look at the hero for the French Line Infantry, Commandant Berbigier, and how you can combine him with the infantry squads, but also with the doctrine cards to really boost your tactical ability on the gaming table. So now we're going to have a look at Commandant Berbigier, who is the core hero for the French Line Infantry that they can attach and boost their abilities with. Before we jump into the actual stats of the hero, I just want to have a look at this painting by Edouard Détaille, who is probably one of the most I would say famous painters of the period. He depicted a lot of the battles of 1870. It's a beautiful painting also on the battle of Resonville, I think it's called in French, Mars La Tour, where he has painted the French Guard Grenadiers. But here he's painted the Commandant Berbigier as he is sitting there on his horse, shot under him. He's wounded. He's got an aide there tending to his wound, and he's rallying the troops on the hills outside Saint-Prévin during the battle. He was commanding the 1st Battalion of the 70th Infantry Regiment during the battle, and they were under extreme pressure as the Prussians were trying to break the flank of the French position, and they were holding on for dear life there. So really inspiring picture, and something that we just snapped up and took directly onto the sculpting table. So the model itself will be a one-to-one of what you see on the painting here. We used the painting as a direct inspiration. I think it adds a lot of historical flavor and period flavor as well to your gaming table. You'll be able to, having flipped through a book or two about the Franco-Prussian War, you have encountered this picture, and now you can translate that onto your gaming table. I think that's adds a lot of historical flavor to the game. So let's have a look at the Commandant Berbigier. Well, he's got the cost of 4 command points. You attach him to a newly recruited French squad or section of line infantry, and he will stay attached to that squad or section for the rest of the game. If the squad or section gets killed off, well, Commandant Berbigier will die with them. So maybe take care of that squad. Don't put them into the mouth of Prussian cannons or anything like that, but play maybe a little bit defensively, so you'll get the ability of Commandant Berbier to continue for you during the game, because his ability does not only limit itself to that unit where he is attached. It actually covers a lot of the French units on the table. So let's have a look here. His ability is called Rally to Me. Berbier desperately tried to rally the French infantry at Saint-Prévert. As long as Berbier is on the table, French Line Infantry will save at a maximum of 5+. So what does that mean? Well, as I talked a little bit about when we looked at the unit card, standard French infantry have a unit strength of 3. When it starts taking casualty, it'll go to unit strength 2 and then eventual unit strength 1 before being wiped out. When it comes to unit strength 2, it is reduced to saving and hitting at 5+. When it's down to unit strength 1, you are hitting and saving at 6+. But with Commandant Berbier, all your units with a unit strength of, all your French Line Infantry units with a unit strength of just 1 will now be saving as if they had unit strength 2. So if you start to combine that with the Doctrine card that I also talked about, where you would have an activation there called Hold the Line, and you choose a unit in command, and this unit rolls an extra defense die per squad in this entire round, well, then you are rolling extra defense die and you are improving your to save factor from a 6+ to a 5+. So all of a sudden, if you have a unit or a section, or if you have some place on the table, you really need to have some staying power, you can do that with Commandant Berbier and combining him with the Doctrine cards en avant. So I would say that this is a strong defensive strategy for the French. Not that much offensively, but the French and their tactical disposition in 1870 was more to the defense than it was to the offense. So we have created a set of Doctrine cards here and a hero ability that will give you some historical flavor and also give you some tools to really counter the Prussian onslaught, because the Prussians are going to be more mobile, they're going to hit you with artillery, and you're going to need to stay on the table to hold on to your tactical objectives while your reinforcements reach the line. So these tools are in your toolbox and can help you do that. So combine Commandant Berbier with your French Line Infantry, keep him out of harm's way, and you can bump up his ability further by activating the Doctrine cards for those units who are in command, and add an extra defense die per squad at only a cost of 1 CP. So a lot of tactical options here for the French Line Infantry to keep keep their nails in the edge of the tactical objectives, and to have some staying power on the table. Right, well, that's all for me for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to do some more unit analysis as we go along, and next up will be the Prussian cuirassiers coming soon. And wish you all a great day out there. I hope you're having some good games and enjoying your hobby. Have a good one. Bye-bye.